Hi everyone! Today we're on 7.5, Cognition, Thinking, Problem Solving, Creativity, and Language. The objective for today is students will be able to apply problem solving techniques to 4 different scenarios. So let's get started. First, thinking. Cognition is essentially thinking. It's the way you process information. When we think of things, we tend to put them in concepts, and this is when we group similar objects, events, and people. We may put them into category hierarchies, which just means that when we categorize information or when we categorize our concepts, some may be ranked higher than others, just the way that we process that information. For example, you have a chapter, then you have sections, and you have subsections, that sort of a thing. Prototypes is when we have a mental image or a best example. So if we think of a prototype of a school, you may think of a big brick building. That would be a mental image. Or a best example would be TC. When it comes to solving problems, there's a few ways that we can go about it, a few strategies. There's 3 strategies that we focus on. The first one is an algorithm. Algorithm is a step-by-step procedure to solve a problem. So think math. Heuristic is a logical rule or procedure. So if there's a problem, I'm looking for Miss Desario, and I can't find her, a logical rule might be, well, she might be in the 3rd floor teacher workroom. And then third and finally is when you have insight, a sudden realization of how to solve a problem. So maybe you're trying to figure it out, and all of a sudden it just dawns on you another way to go about solving that problem. This is where creativity also plays a role. When you're trying to solve problems, the more creative you are, the more options you have. And there's 2 types of creativity that we focus on. The first is convergent, and this is when you narrow down options to finally arrive at a solution. So you might say, no, that wouldn't work. No, this wouldn't work. Oh, this one would work. Then you have divergent thinking. And this is where your creativity is expanding the number of possible solutions. So maybe you have a problem, and instead of trying to narrow down to one solution, you're trying to think of a variety of different ways that you can solve that problem. So convergent means one, you're narrowing it down to one solution. Divergent means that you're actually creating other potential solutions. A researcher by the name of Sternberg came up with 5 components of creativity. First would be expertise in an area allows you to become more creative. Second is imaginative thinking skills, so if you're imaginative. The third is a venturesome personality. Fourth is intrinsic motivation, so it just means that you're internally motivated to find another solution. And the last part is that you are in a creative environment. So taking these 5 concepts of what creates creativity, how can you potentially become more creative? Is you can become an expert in an area. Allow yourself time. Don't try to rush through things. The more time you give yourself to do things, the more creative you can become. But part of that is also taking a mental break. Just because you give yourself 10 hours to do something, if you try to do it 10 hours in a row, you're not going to be able to be as creative as if you worked on it a couple hours a day over a period of time. And then finally, take a look at it from another point of view, especially another culture. There might be another way to do something that somebody else does a little bit better than you do. Continuing to solve problems when you run into obstacles. One obstacle that people run into when they're trying to solve a problem is confirmation bias. We look for information that supports our preconceptions. So if I think something is bad, if I think a restaurant is a bad restaurant, then I'm going to look for every piece of information that I can to support the fact that that's a bad restaurant. The second part is fixation. You're unable to see it from another perspective. So you just can't look at it from another point of view. There's two types of fixation, mental set and functional fixedness. Mental set is that we only approach a problem in one specific way. You don't look at it from anything else. And then the second type of fixation is called functional fixedness. And this is when you think of things only in terms of their usual functions. So if we take a look at this over here, this picture right here for functional fixedness. If you had functional fixedness, you would see that we have a candle, thumbtacks, and matches, and that's all we have. But what if I told you there is a way to make this into a candle holder? How would we do that? How would you make that happen? If we needed to make the candle stick to, let's say, a bulletin board, what would you do to make that happen? And lastly, making decisions and forming judgments. Heuristics. There are two types of heuristics. One is representative, the second is available. Representative heuristics is when we judge the likelihood of something on how well it represents a prototype. So, like I gave the example of prototype of schools before, this is where we would judge other schools based on, let's say, TC. And that's something that's pretty common to do. And then the second one is availability heuristics. And this is where we base judgment on how mentally available information is. So you may be making a decision about something based off of information that you have. And depending on how much information that is, you may not be making the right decision. A second influence of making decisions and forming judgments is overconfidence, the tendency to be more confident than correct. We tend to overestimate our accuracy. I do this all the time where I'm like, no, this is the right way to do it. This is what that answer is, or this is what this is. And I'm overly confident, but that doesn't mean that I'm always correct. And then finally, belief perseverance. And this is when you want to stick to your original belief even after you were proven wrong. So we can argue who's a better basketball player, LeBron James or Michael Jordan. And even if we use every statistic in the world to prove that Michael Jordan is a better basketball player, some of you are still going to think that LeBron James is better. And then finally, how you frame an issue. So depending on how you set it up or how you talk about it depends on how people might make a decision or form a judgment about that issue. And that's it for today.